I had always believed my life was solid, like a well-built house that could withstand any storm. For over 2 decades, my wife, Sarah, and I had what seemed like the perfect marriage. We worked at the same university. She was the director, and I was the vice principal. From the outside, we were the definition of success, respected, admired, and, most importantly, stable. Our 2 kids were in college, but they came home often, and we had those picture-perfect family dinners that made life feel normal. I never once questioned my wife's loyalty. We had built a life together, one filled with shared goals and mutual respect. Or so I thought. Then one day, a student approached me. He was young, maybe 20, and looked incredibly nervous, like he was about to confess something that could change his life, and mine. He hesitated for a moment, shifting on his feet before finally speaking. "Sir, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but I think you deserve to know." His voice was barely a whisper. I raised an eyebrow, confused. "Know what?" He swallowed hard. "Your wife, she's been offering certain students good grades. But, in exchange for something else." At first, I thought I misheard him. My wife, Sarah, the woman who had spent years building a reputation as a strict but fair academic professional, was exchanging grades for what? No, it was impossible. "You must be mistaken," I said, shaking my head, my heart pounding a little faster. The student's expression didn't change. "I wish I was. But I'm not the only one who knows about this." I wanted to brush him off. Maybe he had some grudge against my wife. Maybe he was failing her class and wanted to cause trouble. But something about the way he said it stuck with me like a splinter I couldn't pull out. I told myself it was absurd. Sarah had spent years earning respect in the academic world. She wouldn't throw it all away for something like this. Right. Yet, once the idea was planted in my head, I couldn't shake it. That night, I watched her closely. She came home late, the same way she had for years, muttering something about meetings and administrative work. And for the first time, instead of nodding along, I asked myself a question I had never dared to before. Was she lying? The more I tried to push the thought away, the more it clung to me like a shadow. I had never been the suspicious type, never been the kind of husband who checked texts or questioned late nights. But now, every time Sarah said she had a meeting, I caught myself wondering, is she really where she says she is? I wasn't ready to confront her, not without proof. And deep down, I still hoped the student had been lying or mistaken. But something inside me told me I needed to know the truth. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. One evening, when Sarah had left for one of her supposed work trips, I drove to her office. My palms were sweating as I picked the lock, something I had never done before but had learned from watching way too many crime shows. The room smelled like her perfume, a scent I used to love. Now, it made my stomach twist. I took a deep breath, scanning the space. Nothing looked unusual, papers on the desk, books stacked neatly. But I wasn't looking for anything obvious. I pulled out a small, discreet camera from my pocket. I had spent an entire night debating whether this was going too far, whether I was crossing a line. But at this point, I needed answers. If I was wrong, I'd delete the footage and live with the guilt of doubting my wife. But if I was right, I didn't even want to think about that possibility. I installed the camera in a corner where it wouldn't be noticed, angled just right to capture the whole office. It felt like a betrayal, sneaking around like this. But wasn't she the one betraying me? The next few days dragged by, each one filled with forced small talk at dinner and fake smiles. I pretended everything was normal while my mind raced, waiting to check the footage. Finally, when Sarah left for another late-night meeting, I sat at my laptop and pulled up the recordings. And what I saw made my entire world collapse. At first, the video showed nothing unusual, just Sarah at her desk, looking busy. But then, a young man walked in. He couldn't have been more than 21. He stood nervously in front of her, shifting from foot to foot. And then I saw it. The way she leaned back in her chair, speaking in a tone that was too soft, too familiar. The way she slowly stood up, circling around the desk until she was standing inches from him. The way she tilted her head, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. And then, she reached for him. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. But the worst part, That wasn't the only video. The next night, there was another student. And the night after that, another. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Sarah wasn't just being unfaithful. She was running a system, a disgusting, calculated game exchanging favors for grades. And suddenly, I wasn't just a husband betrayed. I was sitting in the middle of a nightmare. I wish I could say I handled it calmly, that I took a deep breath and planned my next move with a level head. But the truth, I was shaking. My stomach twisted in knots as the weight of what I had seen settled over me like a suffocating fog. This wasn't just infidelity. This was something far worse. She had abused her position, turned her office into something it was never meant to be. And every single time I had trusted her late nights and extra work, she had been lying straight to my face. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the dark screen of my laptop, my mind replaying those videos over and over again. I thought about our kids, how they still looked up to their mother, how they thought we had the perfect family. And I thought about myself, about the complete fool I had been. But there was no more time for thinking. That night, I waited for her to come home. She walked in just like she always did, tossing her bag onto the counter, barely glancing in my direction. "Long day," she muttered, rubbing her temples. "I'm exhausted." I was standing in the middle of the living room, arms crossed. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Busy day at work?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rage bubbling underneath. She barely looked up. "You know how it is. Meetings, reports, grading." I cut her off. "Did you entertain any students today?" The air in the room shifted. For the first time, she really looked at me. Her entire body tensed. "What did you just say?" "You heard me, Sarah." I stepped closer, locking eyes with her. "Or do I need to be more specific? Should I name names? Maybe I should pull out my laptop and let you watch what I saw." The color drained from her face. For the first time in years, I saw something real in her expression. Not the usual exhaustion or indifference, but fear. "James," she whispered, her voice barely there. I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not." I laughed. A short, humorless sound. Don't you dare stand there and lie to me. I have video proof. You want to explain how you've been spending your late nights? How you've turned our marriage into a sick joke?" She opened her mouth, like she was about to deny it again, but then, something changed. Her expression hardened. The fear, gone. Replaced with something colder. Something calculated. "You really think you're innocent in all of this?" she snapped. "You've been checked out for years, James. Completely oblivious. You didn't even notice how miserable I was. Maybe if you actually paid attention to me, I wouldn't have needed to." "Stop." I couldn't listen to another word. She had destroyed our marriage, and now she wanted to blame me? Like I had somehow forced her into this? "Don't twist this around, Sarah. You did this. Not me. You threw away our family, our life, for what?" For the first time, she had nothing to say. She just stood there, lips pressed together, her eyes darting toward the front door like she was considering running. And then she said something that made my blood run cold. "You won't do anything about this," she whispered. "You never do. You'll just let it go. Because you always have." And that's when it hit me. She was right, at least about the old me. I had let things go before. I had ignored red flags, convinced myself things would get better, stayed silent instead of standing up for myself. But not this time. "This time," I said, my voice steady, "I'm going to the police." And for the first time since I had confronted her, her mask cracked. Her confidence faltered. "You can't be serious," she scoffed, but there was an edge to her voice now. "James, don't be stupid. This isn't just about our marriage. If you go to the police, you'll ruin everything. You'll ruin our family. Our kids. Our kids." The thought of having to tell them what their mother had done felt like a knife to the chest. But you know what? She was the one who had ruined everything. Not me. I grabbed my keys, turned my back on her, and walked out the door. I had already made up my mind. This wasn't just about us anymore. What she had done was illegal. And I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into silence. As I drove to the police station, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, all I could think was, this is the end of my marriage, of the life I thought I had. And there was no turning back now. The drive to the police station felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold from a distance. I kept replaying Sarah's words in my head, how she tried to twist it, to pin her actions on me. You'll ruin our family. Like I was the villain in all of this. Like I was the one who had crossed every moral line imaginable. But no. She had done this. She had destroyed our family. I was just the one who finally decided to stop pretending. I pulled into the station's parking lot, my hands still shaking as I turned off the engine. For a brief second, I hesitated. Once I walked through those doors, there was no undoing this. No second chances. But then I thought about my kids. I thought about the students she had manipulated. And I stepped out of the car. Inside, everything felt cold, sterile. A uniformed officer sat behind the front desk, typing something into a computer. He barely looked up as he said, "How can I help you?" I took a deep breath. My name is James Carter. My wife is Sarah Carter. She's the director of the university here. The officer finally looked up. His expression shifted from boredom to mild curiosity. And I pulled out my laptop bag and placed it on the counter. My hands were trembling as I unzipped it and pulled out the flash drive I had prepared before leaving the house. "I have proof," I said, my voice tight. "She's been abusing her position, exploiting students, offering them higher grades in exchange for personal favors." That got his attention. He took the flash drive, giving me a long, unreadable look before nodding. "Wait here." And then, the next part of my life, the part one never saw coming, began. They took my statement. It took hours. I had to explain everything. How I first heard the rumors, how I set up the camera, what I had found. The officer who reviewed the footage kept a professional face, but I saw it in his eyes. The same thing I had been feeling since I first saw the videos: disgust. By the end of it, I felt empty. One of the detectives finally sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Carter, we're going to need to process this. We'll be issuing an arrest warrant." Arrest warrant. The words didn't feel real. But they were. And later that evening, the police showed up at my house. I didn't go inside. I parked down the street, watching from a distance as they knocked on the front door. I saw Sarah answer, her face a mask of confusion at first. Then realization hit. She didn't fight. Didn't scream. She just stood there stone-faced as they cuffed her hands behind her back. For a brief moment, our eyes met. And for the first time, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not anger. Not even regret. Resignation. Like she had known, deep down, that this was coming all along. They led her to the patrol car, and as they drove away, I sat there in my own car, staring at the empty house. The home we had built. The life we had shared. All of it gone. That night, I got the hardest phone call of my life. I had to tell my kids. I waited until they were both home from college for the weekend. Sat them down in the living room, the same room where we used to laugh, play games, watch movies together. And then I told them the truth. Not the sugar-coated version. Not the "mom made a mistake" version. The real version. I watched their faces fall apart. My daughter shook her head. "No. No, this can't be true. Mom wouldn't. She wouldn't do that." I wanted to shield them from it. I wanted to erase it, to make it so that they never had to carry this shame. But I couldn't. Because their mother had already made that choice for them. That weekend, they both left earlier than usual. And when they did, I knew things would never be the same. I had done the right thing. I had exposed the truth. But in doing so, I had shattered the last remnants of our family. And that's when it hit me. I couldn't stay in that house. I couldn't live in a place where every glance from a neighbor, every whisper behind my back reminded me of what happened. So I made a decision. I packed a bag. And I left the city. Driving away from the city felt like stepping into a void. No clear direction, no real destination, just an overwhelming need to get away from everything that had crumbled around me. For the first few hours, I didn't think. I just drove. The roads blurred together, and my mind replayed everything in a continuous, painful loop. The arrest. The conversation with my kids. The look on Sarah's face as they took her away. I should have felt relief. I should have felt some sense of justice, knowing that she was finally facing the consequences of what she had done. But all I felt was exhausted. I had spent over 2 decades building a life that turned out to be nothing more than a beautiful lie. And now, I had no idea who I was without it. I ended up in a quiet coastal town, miles away from anyone who knew my name. A place where I could disappear for a while. I found a cheap motel, checked in with cash, and locked the door behind me. For the first time in days, I sat down on the edge of the bed and let myself breathe. No more cameras. No more secrets. No more pretending. Just silence. And in that silence, I realized something. I wasn't just grieving my marriage. I was grieving the version of myself that had believed in it. The next few weeks were a blur. I kept my phone off most of the time, only turning it on to check for messages from my kids. They were struggling to process everything, and I knew that no matter how far I ran, I couldn't escape the damage this had done to them. I wanted to fix it, to make it less painful. But how do you fix something when the damage is permanent? I spent my days walking along the beach, staring out at the endless horizon. Something about the waves made me feel small. And for the first time, that was a good thing. Because if I was small, then maybe this pain, this shame, was small too. Maybe it wouldn't last forever. One day, I got a call from my lawyer. "The divorce is finalized," he said. Just like that. 23 years of marriage, reduced to a legal document and a signature. I should have felt something. Anything. But all I felt was relief. It was over. Really over. I told my lawyer to put the house on the market. There was no reason to hold on to it anymore. That place wasn't my home. It was a graveyard of everything I had lost. And I was done living in the past. A few weeks later, the trial started. Sarah had been formally charged, and the university had conducted a full investigation. There were more students than I had originally known about. More victims who had come forward once they realized they weren't alone. The evidence was overwhelming. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison for abuse of power and misconduct. 15 years. It should have felt like justice. But justice doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't erase the betrayal. It doesn't fix the fact that my kids would now have to live the rest of their lives knowing their mother wasn't who they thought she was. And that was something she would never be able to undo. The day Sarah was sentenced, I sat on the beach, watching the waves roll in. 15 years. That was how long she'd be locked away. 15 years to sit in a cell and think about everything she had done. But I wasn't the one trapped. Not anymore. For so long, I had let my life be defined by her choices, by the lies, by the betrayal. I had let her actions dictate my future, steal my peace. But not anymore. I sold the house. The place where we had raised our kids, where we had built a life together, it wasn't home anymore. It was just a place full of painful memories. I used the money to buy a small place by the coast. Nothing fancy, just enough. A place where I could start over, where no one whispered behind my back, where I wasn't the husband of the woman who threw everything away. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I still thought about my kids every day. They were struggling in their own ways, trying to come to terms with who their mother really was. We had hard conversations, painful ones, but I never lied to them. I told them the truth, even when it hurt. Because after everything, that was the one thing I could give them, honesty. They didn't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But they were healing, in their own time, in their own way. And that was all I could ask for. Then something happened that I never expected. I met someone. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't even sure I was ready. But life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Her name was Emily. She wasn't like Sarah. She was kind in a way that felt real, not forced. She listened, not just to my words, but to the silence between them. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like a person again. Not a broken man. Not a fool. Just me. I don't think about Sarah much anymore. She's just a chapter in a book I've already closed. Sometimes, I wonder if she ever regrets it. If she lies awake in her cell, thinking about everything she lost. But I don't need to know the answer. Because I've made peace with something that took me far too long to understand. Her betrayal didn't break me. It set me free. Thank you for visited my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.